one of the unfortunate things that the Indigenous people have to do is they have to not so much as fight, but they have to reckon with the world to say we are the original gardeners within our own homelands, our own territories. And it is our obligation, because when we stepped into this world, we stepped into this world to be caretakers of our ancestral gardens. Does that make sense? You see, I cannot speak about what each water protector goes through, or air protector, or land protector goes through, because they have their own ancestral stories. But what I can do, and not even so much as what I do, is I can just be present along with other elders and that around there and ground them and to remind them to keep their feet within their original territories and not slip away. Because chaos is like a perpetrator within these venues, within all around Mother Earth. And what they do is they come in and they groom you, and they come and take what they want to take, right? And they leave a path of destruction. And what is happening right now up in Line 3 and out there, you know, we have these perpetrators coming. You can come from Canada, they come from wherever they want. But they do know that we live in the garden and stuff, and it's protected. And it's supposedly supposed to be protected because they're federal lands. But anyways, they get that miscommunication of who has the proper jurisdiction. So as long as you have that trail of jurisdiction that you should or should not follow, and that is from county, state, government, federal, it can get lost in translation, and by the time it finally appears in this stuff, the damage has already been done, because that perpetrator has already masked and he knows this game real well. So we taught our children to survive and to stand and to protect those gardens, because the first thing that your spirit is in water. And this planet gives only so much water to each of us. It's kind of like we should never be buying that water, because we were told within our prophecies that there will come a time that the solicitation of those four elements is going to happen. And many of you might heard me say within less than 150 years our organic lifestyle is being destroyed. Because when I was younger, we never had a water bill. And within that water system, there's life from the rivers. People will say, no, there's nothing wrong with that tap water, what it is. That's just liquid, because it's filtered and filtered and filtered. And you honestly have to say to yourself, do I really trust that? I say to each one of you is to ask the water works in those areas that do those filtrations, that keeps everything in out there, of what they need to go through, just to make it liquid. So there's so many elements, and there's so many different levels that goes on in out there that we bring forth to those water protectors. But I want to tell you something about them. They're not just Indigenous people of the land. They're doctors, they're therapists, they're teachers, they're researchers, they're scientists. They know. But the unfortunate thing about them, because of our justice system, will play into that chaos and that green thing they call money. And it's unfortunate where we're at in Minnesota that we have to pay for the brutal things from our jurisdictions and out there, because they are protecting Enbridge. So it's kind of sad. There's one thing, even this old lady here was going down a back roads because I was going home from the gathering. We had a gathering up in northern Minnesota, and there was over 3,000 people from all walks of life in that there. And when it concluded in that there, going home, I went to the back roads, because that's my area, that's where I live. That Enbridge followed me in trucks,
so I just continued.
And then the sheriffs followed me in their trucks. I had no internet service or whatever, intimidating us. There's my daughter and I intimidating us. So we would have no way to do it until we got, they followed us for over 30 miles, even out of their own jurisdictions. So the crimes that are happening against people that are fighting for something that we all, not just Indigenous people, but we all need, because that water source If we contaminate one water source on part of the planet, doesn't mean, oh, they just got bad water over there. No, that is the belly flow of Mother Earth. What happens in that drop is going to happen all around the planet. And that water is something amazing because it can go into moisture and go into the air and it can travel. Because you got to remember those 4 elements are relatives. You see, the next thing they did was then they started charging you a heating bill. And so on and so on. And this happened in a short time. But we cannot just talk about one without the other. And we have to be responsible because that's who we all are. You see, those 4 elements shows no prejudice. That chaos created it. So we have to be out there supporting one another. So this is kind of this world we're in right now, and what we're going on. Is it sad to say that us Indigenous peoples and our allies have to be present, and we have to wear our advertising on us. So I just want you to be alert, be appreciative, just know. But when you hear water protectors, air protectors, and land protectors and this stuff, they're not just doing it to be heard or to be naughty. They're doing it for you, your children, and your grandchildren, and all the gardens that we all should have preserved. Because we, as Indigenous people within the states in my territory, I sit with my daughter, my granddaughter, my great-daughter, and I did the same. So my great-grandmother's teaching goes to my great-granddaughter, because that is our obligation, is to keep our lands and our appreciation of this residency as clean as it was when we entered. So with that, I'm going to pass this on, and I want to say Chi Miigwech, and I'm hoping they get to show a briefing of the water protectors, because I always love to sing all the protectors before us, because I'm just one voice. You know, I don't speak for them. I'm just one voice that supports them. You know, if they fall, I just want to make sure that there's a pair behind them to say, you know, get up. You can do it. You have the strength in you. I'm just kind of the finger that likes to push their empowerment button to let them know that they're worth it. All right? Chi Miigwech.
Chi Miigwech, thank you. Y'all are so lucky that she offered to do this with us. We're very thankful for that. I just want to welcome also my friends here to introduce themselves. Nicole, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hometakiapi, Nicole Montclair Donaghy, Machiapi, na Lakota Machia, Kempeshka Chinkilawi, Tashpa Wakpa, Ektawati, na Ian Wosla Matahan. Good morning, my relatives. My name is Nicole Montclair Donaghy. My Lakota name is Little Shell Woman, and I come here from Standing Rock, from North Dakota. I'm an enrolled citizen of the sovereign nation of Standing Rock. I also have descendancy in the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara people, as well as Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewas. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Habushu and Nwe Maganadug, Manadugwi Wizens Indigenous Cause, Makwandude, Mikanakwaju and Dunjaba, Kikabe Kong and Da. My name is Kyle Hill. I'm enrolled in the Turtle Mountain Band of Ojibwe. I am also from Sistan Wapton Oyate in the Cheyenne River Sioux tribes. I live in Minneapolis. Right now, I'm an assistant professor in the University of North Dakota School of Medicine and Department of Indigenous Health. So I teach in a Indigenous Health PhD program, which is kind of the first of its kind. And so my history with, you know, Standing Rock, No Dapple, the Line 3 pipeline, been kind of on the front lines, but also as a supporter in many ways. And so I'm just happy to be here. Thanks everybody for coming.
Ellen.
Okay. Hi. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ellen Anderson. I'm the Climate Program Director at the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy, and we're an organization that follows the law and the science to protect the environment and to hold decision makers accountable. And we are from Minnesota, as you've heard, and we know that is the ancestral land of Dakota and Anishinaabe people. And I feel very honored to be part of this really distinguished panel today. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. We'll get back to you in a second. So we're going to swap out some other friends and allies who are here as well. I'll have them introduce themselves when they come up. Also, we're doing a lot in a very short time, so it's going to move quickly. And if you want to know more at the end, we'll provide where you can get more information. So we have a quick video on like what Line 3 is.
And a lot of people don't know.
Do we have audio?
Think of it this way. There are 6 really old pipelines that they put through in northern Minnesota, shipping diluted tar sands from Alberta to Superior, Wisconsin. And one of those lines is called Line 3. It has, according to Enbridge, about 900 structural anomalies in it. Structural anomalies are things like small little pinhole leaks, maybe it comes some cracks, and some of those end up to be big problems, like that Kalamazoo spill. That was a structural anomaly. Line 3, it's old and it's corroding and it's at the end of its life. It's already had a number of leaks and spills, and frankly, it's a catastrophe waiting to happen. There is a likelihood that there is a whole bunch of contamination under the present line. And once that corrodes, our children and grandchildren may one day watch it drain a lake or a wetland or flood a farm field. Fixing these problems is very expensive, so Enbridge wants to abandon the pipeline, walk away, and build a brand new one in a brand new corridor. Enbridge calls this a replacement project. They're replacing Line 3. They are not replacing Line 3. They are putting in a whole new corridor and doubling the size of the line. That is not a replacement. That's a brand new line, and that's what's wrong. So we've got 2 problems. First, we've got a problem of the proposed new Sandpiper and Line 3 corridor through the heart of our best lakes and wild.
You can stop it there. The zoom was strange on that. That's not how it normally looks. Here we go. Okay. So this was my best attempt at trying to map out kind of what the movement for Line 3 has looked like. The other kind of just quick context I wanted to give for who we are, you know, with the exception of our great grandmother here, for the most part, like, we are not frontline activists. Like, we have not been like living in. There's people who are living in the woods who've been putting their lives on the line every single day to stop this pipeline. And most of those people, the ones who are here in Glasgow, are not delegates to this conference, right? So that is a big problem that we couldn't bring in the people who are really taking the biggest sacrifices because they don't have badges, right? They're not allowed in here. So just to show that, like, frontline activists really have been the ones who have, you know, held up the construction of the pipeline, who really made a huge impact and made tremendous personal sacrifices. And the rest of this is just, it's a lot to understand, but tribal governments were a huge part of this. There was tribes, the majority of our tribes did not support the pipeline. NGOs, both local and national, played a huge part. I have the army of consultants. We had consultants from around the country helping us with the political side of things, trying to talk to different DC lawmakers, flooding their LinkedIns with messages, all kinds of things. Tons of lawyers. We have a whole court system process that Ellen's going to brief you on. But just so you can see, the movement was comprehensive, that there was multiple strategies tried to fight this from every different angle. And it took people from across all sectors to really put up our best fight against the pipeline. Ellen, do you want to explain the PUC real quick?
I already have 2 microphones. I just have the wrong. Hello. I'm sorry, I'm hoarding all the microphones. So I want to talk a little bit about what happened at the PUC. So yeah, just in a few minutes. So I am an attorney. Our organization has attorneys, and we represented the Youth Climate Interveners in one of the many lawsuits. So I just want to give a short history about sort of the legal effort that was underway to move this forward, to fight this battle. And I have to start by saying, well, I think it's a story of how government and legal institutions failed to produce justice. And what's important to know about Enbridge, the company that Winona talked about in the video, the company pushing this pipeline, it was really important that they had a very well-funded and comprehensive public relations campaign that influenced all of the legal decisions and government leaders, or most of them. And their narrative, as was mentioned in the video, is that they had to build a new pipeline to protect people from the old broken one. And it was a false narrative, because honestly, the federal government has control of pipeline safety. The federal government could have stopped them from operating the old Line 3. None of those things happened, required them to repair it. Instead, Enbridge said, we must build a new pipeline at double the capacity. And so that was one of the main challenges that we faced. So a couple of key points that happened. There were a lot of different administrative processes, environmental impact statements that were created and then rejected, and then it went to the Public Utilities Commission, and their job in Minnesota is to regulate electricity and gas, and they had to make a decision about whether the pipeline was needed and whether they have to approve a route permit, and that process went on for many years and a lot of litigation. And so just to summarize some of the key takeaways that happened along the way. So during the process, there's lots of evidence, lots of people testifying, all kinds of information presented, and there's a judge that evaluates all the evidence. And the judge concluded that the facts show that the impact of the project would be 193 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions equivalent, totaling $287 billion in social costs. So a very, very high price to pay. And she said that's what we found in the evidence, that's what the evidence shows, and that this outweighs the impacts, the negative consequences outweigh the positive. And so that was a very strong finding, but the Public Utilities Commission went ahead and approved it anyway. And they did it, when they approved it, they followed this false narrative that Enbridge had put out there. They said that, oh, we have a gun to our head. We must do this. We must approve this in order to protect people from the old crumbling Line 3, which of course Enbridge just abandoned anyway. And they said under Minnesota law, they have to prove that there's a demand for this oil. In other words, someone must want this oil. And this pipeline is going through Minnesota and going into Wisconsin. And so the fact is, this wasn't even intended to serve the people of Minnesota. And so what Enbridge said, and what the PUC accepted, is that the oil companies wanted to push oil through the line, which is basically, they had supply that they wanted to push through. And so they approved this based on supply, not on demand. We all know the difference between supply and demand, and there was no discussion about do Minnesotans want this? Is this for Minnesotans? And what about the future of fossil fuels that must be eliminated? And so there were so many mistakes that were made. And then the last thing, two quick more things I want to point out. There were many, many lawsuits along the way challenging each step of the legal and regulatory process, and there were so many participants in those lawsuits. So many tribal nations, many environmental and indigenous organizations, faith leaders, and the Minnesota Department of Commerce. There was actually one state agency that said, this is not right, this is not right. They didn't show that we need this. And so then they sued the PUC. And so you had one state agency suing another one. It was highly unusual, and obviously it showed a lack of leadership across our government entities. And I guess what I would say for takeaways, I think the narrative piece of it was so important that Enbridge put this story out and everyone bought into it. Not everyone, but too many people, including government officials. And what I've learned here at the COP, this particular COP, they said there's 13,000 people who are observers, who are people like us, people who are here providing a voice, and in lieu of the thousands and thousands of other people that we know that care more about the future of the earth and following justice. And so that's the one thing we have. That is the power we have, as our voices and the voices of everyone. We can, so besides fixing all the government, the laws and the leaders. So I'll just stop there. I hope that covers enough, and I'm happy to ask questions later. Answer questions.
Yeah, there's, like I said, there's a lot of process, 7, 8 years of process and lawsuits to cover. So when the process failed, what was left to hold back the line was Frontline Resistance. And so this happened in multiple ways across the state of Minnesota. There was multiple camps run in different ways, some by nonprofit organizations, some by independent groups, different levels of security culture, all across the route of the pipeline. And so throughout construction, over 900 people were arrested in the processes. And we estimate that so bail ranged up to $20,000 per person. So we estimate that we've spent at least $450,000 in bail costs or in future court costs. And that's just what we know. The counties really escalated bail and made it outrageous. So these frontline activists, not only were they really putting their mental health, their well-being, their physical well-being on the line, they also, many of them are going to be tied up in years-long court processes. And so I just wanted to invite Nicole to talk a little bit about, where a lot of the plans for how they treated frontline resistors to Line 3 came from Standing Rock. So the state of Minnesota had been preparing since Standing Rock how they would, violate the folks. Thank you so much again for coming, for being here with us. She's going to Action for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, which is
our young men and our women, they're the desserts on the plates to all of these men. They call them man camps. So there's a whole entity of that that needs to be spoken about. So I'm going to that action right now. Listen, I'm so glad. Yay, Line 3, water protectors, not hemorrhage.
Yeah, thank you again. It's a very important thing to talk about. And so, Nicole, do you want to talk a little bit about what happened at Standing Rock?
Sure. So I'm sure you all have heard stories that have come out of Standing Rock with the No Dakota Access Pipeline movement. And so from what I can see with what's happening near Line 3, the state of Minnesota took the plays out of the playbook from North Dakota. And so in North Dakota, our water protectors that faced jail time, their bail actually went up to like around $1 million. And there was private donors that was donating and putting money before people were being arrested because we knew that was coming. And so being on the ground, I live in Bismarck. I live in Bismarck, which is like 60 miles north of Cannonball. I grew up 12 miles south of the pipeline, Dakota Access Pipeline. And so being on the ground up in the capital city, I saw the fleets of militarized vehicles coming in. They had Hennepin County sheriffs coming in, sheriffs from the upper Midwest region that were there, that were part of the militarized police force that did harm against the water protectors in Standing Rock. And so this was an actual planned militarized movement to, one, villainize the people that were standing in peaceful protest, and two, to infiltrate the camps and criminalize the people that were defending our rights, defending the water rights of the Standing Rock Nation. And so a lot of what we're seeing in Line 3 has come from Standing Rock. It's the same actors, it's the same militarized police force, it's comparative to the US cavalry coming. And so a lot of that is very similar. And so I just wanted to share that. Yeah, I'll stop there.
I also just want to say, it wasn't just the bad things, right? Just the police didn't just learn from Standing Rock. There was also just Standing Rock like changed the whole paradigm of what was possible when it came to Indigenous resistance. And these things have happened all over Turtle Island. There's been fights at Oak Flat. There's been fights across, what is now called Canada, against pipelines up there and against the tar sands. So I just want to say that too. Standing Rock also was a prayerful movement that really brought so much hope to Indigenous environmentalists. And so I want to just make sure that I thank Nicole and her people and her for being in that fight, because it really did keep up hope for people once we had to fight against Line 3.
In Standing Rock, we are by no means like the first community to use these protest camps, these spirit camps, but our nation was the catalyst to the Indigenous movement. I mean, there's so many that came before us. It was just time for that pendulum to swing, and it just so happened to be at the time and at the place of Standing Rock Sioux Nation. So, yeah, thank you.
One really important thing we wanted to say on this panel about the state violence during the Line 3 fight is that Enbridge actually, so our state formed a thing called the Northern Lights Task Force, which was a coalition of a lot of different local sheriffs, our state government, our state National Guard, the Department of Homeland Security, many different kinds of forces. And that was formed years in advance of the actual resistance taking place. It was part of the governor's race that happened before the pipeline was even started. This has been a big issue for a long time. But what the most frightening part about it is they basically let Enbridge buy our police. So Enbridge paid, the number just came out, $2.4 million to the Northern Lights Task Force to basically buy our police as their own private security force. So at Standing Rock, they had privatized forces there, and at Line 3, we had the Department of Homeland Security there being paid by Enbridge. Enbridge bought new toys for all of these northern police departments so they could have LRADs, so they could have weapons. They basically were torturing people who were in jail, using pain to try to coerce them into confessing. So there's a lot of horrible things that happened at the hands of that. And also the uprising that happened in Minneapolis was really used as a political excuse to quell any kind of massive uprising during the Line 3 construction. Is it playing?
And when the officer came, I realized, I guess I'm not supposed to be here. And so I just continued to pray. And I prayed and prayed till I had to leave. And but I didn't leave the machine lab. Yay! So that's the
I love that little video. That's Dawn Goodwin, who's one of the leaders of Rise Coalition. And she's actually also from White Earth. She's my cousin. And is just an amazing leader who was doing a lot of the frontline work. All of these camps were led by women. So it's just incredibly powerful in that way. So that is a Department of Homeland Security helicopter being used as a weapon of war against frontline resistors. So they brought the helicopter down when protesters were locked down at an action at this pump site. They used the helicopter as a weapon to stir up all of this dust to try to get those people out of that site. It was really horrifying. And our governor, no one said anything about that. Okay, and now I'm going to introduce Julia so she can talk a little bit about working in allyship with Indigenous folks.
Hello. She's Sheilas Aharam. Sauna, Minnesota, Ahami. Erdui, Dakota, Agus Anishinaabe. So I'm Julia Nerbonne, and I am from Minnesota, and I've just introduced myself in Scottish Gaelic. And you may know that Scottish Gaelic is also a UNESCO endangered language. And one of the privileges I've had is to be working day in and day out with my Anishinaabe brothers and sisters and listening to them on the front lines, introduce themselves in their language, but also to be reviving language in their place. So that's been powerful for me. I'm of Scottish descent, and it's been sort of a homecoming for me coming to Scotland and being able to be with folks who also experienced language removal and are working to recover their own language. So I'm the executive director of an organization in Minnesota that works with faith actors, Buddhists and Muslims and UU and Quakers and lots and lots of Lutherans. And we have been up on the front lines in solidarity, taking action on the front lines. I was arrested on December 7th, 2020. My first live court case is not until the 10th of February 2022. And this is something that's hanging over the heads of over 900 people in Minnesota. It's pretty intense. And I want to say that while faith actors care about carbon emissions, I started at Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light, and people were doing some energy audits of churches and other things to reduce carbon. This movement has activated a group of people because it is fundamentally about justice. And people are able to see that, in fact, the rights of Anishinaabe people, basic treaty rights, are core to the message of what they care about, which is making sure that we are protecting our neighbors, that we are listening to those who are voiceless, that we are fighting for the rights of all people and the environment. So anyway, we've been up there praying, doing a lot of praying. One of the experiences that, one of the things that we have done is we bring a group of faith actors up and we pray with our own prayers at the river in a circle with Indigenous women mostly. And through those prayers, like Mary Lyon says, we are connected to that place. And I guess what I want to just leave you with is, you know, I told you that I'm learning Scottish Gaelic. I think that one of the ways that we can get this whole scene in here is just like makes me crazy. I don't know how anybody can make good negotiations and good decisions in the context of what feels like just a total zoo, right? But I make good decisions when I have my feet on the ground, when I'm breathing, when I'm with people that I have been in relationship with. And while we may have sort of massively lost, and what oil is going through the pipeline, and I cannot cover the pain and the anger and the frustration of the people who are up there, the young people. We have also built an incredible network of people who understand that we're not going to get to the end of this without prayer, that we're not going to get to the end of this without relationships, and that there's something much, much deeper than the sort of festival of finance that is out there. So thank you for listening, and I am excited to hear more about the healing process.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, you guys, we have so little time and so much, so I'm just going to go real quick through some things. So one of the most important parts of line 3, too, of the resistance to it was telling the story of it through art. This piece right here is by one of my favorite people to work with this year. Her name's Dio Kramer. She's a young illustrator. And this is a march we did in DC at the Army Corps. We had a like 500-foot long puppet of a black snake. So there's been a lot of beauty and creativity in this movement in the face of like tremendous destruction, and that's been inspiring. These are the faces of some of the core women at this movement. These are the women who've been stopping this pipeline, and they're still fighting. but all through the construction process. And these pictures are taken by a woman named Nedonis Green, amazing photographer. But we actually ran a full-page ad in the New York Times with these faces. These were shared by like Leonardo DiCaprio and Mark Ruffalo and stuff like that. Really just trying to focus on like the human impact of the pipeline by sharing the faces of the women who are leading it. We can skip the video. So that's just, this is the delivery of over 1 million signatures to the Army Corps of Engineers of people in opposition to Line 3 asking Joe Biden and the leaders of the Army Corps to stop this pipeline. People have traveled there from all over the country to be there that day. It was really beautiful. And that's actually a good lead into our friend who's on Zoom, Ron. We can bring him in now.
Bonjour, everyone. Makadea and Quad Indigenous Cause. Waba Branica Nunjba, Makwandundame. My name's Ron Turney. I'm from the White Earth Nation. I'm part of the Bear Clan. I'd like to speak about Line 3 and the damage it's done to our environment. I'd like to share some footage here, and here we go. Hopefully everyone can see this. So what's going on here is the Mississippi River. This is where Camp Firelight was started. Over here you see the drill pad on the east easement. This is the west easement actually. So when a drill comes underneath, this was 60 feet deep below the Mississippi River. This is the riverbed here. When they're drilling through, they extract riverbed and soil, and it gets replaced with drilling fluids. And eventually over time, it fills up with, the cavities fill up with so much fluid, it reaches the surface, and they have a frack out. So between July 15th and July 20th, we had 2 frack outs in this area right here. Those were covered up with fresh marsh and green sandbags so they couldn't be seen. And on July 20th, during a press conference during right to the headwaters, we had one pop up right next to the river here. Here's where the river went through. We have a major frack out here. And this plume here is suspected to be very large because my footage from the 18th, 2 days prior, shows the fluid already in the wetlands. So they were drilling and pumping for days, filling this cavity up. And what happens with that cavity is when the water goes down again, maybe next summer, hopefully we won't have another drought, this whole area is gonna sink. We could have a new pond here. This land, all this soil could sink down and rupture this pipeline here. So this is a very volatile area. It was one of the worst places to build a pipeline. That gives you a little insight of what's going on underneath the ground there. Here's the July 20th frack out. This is the site where the following day, Jamie Pinkham, the Army Corps, and about 25 water protectors, we toured this easement. We were shown those 2 frack outs leading up to this site here. When we got out here, this is how they left it. We sent it to Minnesota Pollution Control. When 2 days later, they confirmed the results. It contained Power Pack L, which is a hazardous additive. It shouldn't be entering a waterway, sewer, or water. This is how it's left now. It's settled to the bottom now. It's turned a rusty colored sludge, and it's now sitting there. It's about a foot deep right there, and there's still solid around here in the exterior. And you can see back here the other chemicals coming up in the easement. Now this is a major issue back here because, as you know, there's breaches along this Line 3 project. There's a major one that was up in Clearbrook. That happened on January 21st. Enbridge failed to report it accurately. They said it was uncontrollable dewatering conditions, which means they falsely reported that they went too deep. They were supposed to go 12 feet deep. They dug 28 feet deep with their trenches, and they did the same thing here. So our hydrologists and geologists have identified this area as an aquifer breach. Now that we have one on each side where they built this bridge. This is a picture of the no trespassing sign right next to that breach, and we have chemicals rising in the background here. When I posted this picture on the Indigenous Environmental Network Facebook page, the next morning they went and took these signs down. They don't want the world to see their actions, their spills out here. Here's a picture of the two frac outs that the environmental monitor and the senior Enbridge supervisor showed us. And what you're seeing here are two catastrophic failures that went unreported to the Minnesota Pollution Control, according to their list of 28 frac outs. Now, these are crimes, these are felonies that were witnessed by water protectors and the Army Corps. According to Minnesota Statute 609.671, not reporting a spill or a drilling fluid release to state regulators is a crime. It's a felony. We also have another issue of Enbridge drilling outside of fishery restrictions. So they had a frac out in Palisade. We monitored them during July 23rd, and they weren't supposed to be drilling until July 30th. So a full week before they're supposed to be able to drill, they were doing it. They have no oversight out here. So MPCA, Minnesota DNR, Army Corps, they've all been dragging their feet. According to this list here, you can see that those two frac outs that I just showed you aren't even on the list. So from July 20th and before, it's not on there. So pipelines nowadays are being charged. This is from about a month ago. Energy Transfer, no DAPL owners were charged with 48 crimes in Pennsylvania. And the felony counts there in Pennsylvania consisted of them not reporting their spills to state regulators. Now, Enbridge has a history of not reporting their spills. So their frac out, their aquifer breach up at Clearbrook happened January 21st. An independent monitor didn't notify DNR until June. And then DNR didn't notify the public until September 15th, 2 weeks before the project was completed. So Enbridge has a failure of being transparent. Now, this is how the Mississippi River looks now. This is September 20th. And this after a heavy rainfall. Now, all this fluid is coming downriver now. It's in our wild rice beds, and it can be seen floating 12 miles downriver.
Ron, can you hear me?
It comes up as a gray mixture substance, then it rusts. There's a rust color sludge, and it's running off right down in our wetlands, right next to the Mississippi River.
Ron, can you hear me?
Yep.
Ron? We only have 10 minutes and we have 2 other speakers because we added in great-grandmother Mary Lyons. So can we wrap on this one?
Okay.
Thank you so much.
This is a picture of the fish.
Thank you.
All right. There's no more fish left in the river downriver. So
there's so much importance. So Ron works with Indigenous Environmental Network, and so you should go to IEN's pages and look at all of his incredible research and help fund his GoFundMe to help him keep doing this work. He's incredible. This is just incredible, and if he wasn't doing this, nobody would be. So thank you, Ron. Also, he woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning to be with us. I'm so sorry that you got so little time when you woke up so early. So go and follow these pages, see all this damage. It's horrifying. This is Ron outside of the Army Corps talking about these frac outs. He does amazing work. Thank you again. Okay, Kyle, do you want to talk real quickly?
A little closer. This is the Mississippi River right here. These are just sandbags.
Hello?
Okay. Bonjour, this is on. Okay. I think one of the major things to consider with respect to this project, as well as when we think about Dakota Access Pipeline, is the lack of free and prior informed consent and the indigenous rights that were undermined in both of these instances. You know, for us as Anishinaabe people, our creation stories involve these water beds and the rice beds, right? And so when we talk about like and traditional and indigenous ecological knowledge that kind of are imperatives, moral imperatives for adaptation and mitigation of climate change, our practices involve these lakes. So these lakes are like our spirituality and the relationship that we share with these lakes are critical to our being. So we can't take our health as people and divorce it from the health of our land. And I think that's what's most important for me. And so as we, what's called manuminike, harvesting wild rice, we go in there, and as we actively harvest, it's really, the gift here is imperfection. As we knock the wild rice into the canoe, some of the wild rice misses and goes back into the lake and reseeds it for the next season, right? And so if some of these lake beds and wild rice beds and river beds are being contaminated with this water, it's not going to be able to provide the wild rice that we need that's critical for that's one of our traditional foods that we use in almost everything, right? And so, I think, you know, with respect to the climate crisis, we talk a lot about the eco-anxiety of it, but also I think for Indigenous people, we've already, through settler colonialism, have lost so much. And so we talk about ecological grief for us. And so I think as we move forward and we continue to fight, we have to reflect and recognize that for Indigenous people, in particular for Anishinaabe here, the Lakota and Dakota and Oceti-Sakowee communities that are in Standing Rock, this land is our, not only our homelands, but our place of our spiritual place that guides our traditional and ecological knowledges and governs our relationship and our lifeways for Earth. And so that's, as we kind of close this panel, that's just a small piece that I wanted to provide because like I've been involved and we have our own wild rice or harvesting camps back home where this is terrifying. The opportunity for the contamination and the frack outs and the you know, the aquifers that were disrupted or damaged in this process for the Line 3 pipeline.
Thank you so much, Kyle. We're really lucky also to have a representative from Minnesota here, Frank Hornstein. So, Frank, do you want to take it away?
Thank you, Ashley. It's an honor to be here and to be among water protectors and allies. I'm Frank Hornstein. I am a state representative in the Minnesota House of Representatives, and I represent a district in Minneapolis. And I'll just say that, like so many, we learned about allyship and continue to learn about allyship, what it means to be an ally to the Indigenous community and other BIPOC communities working on environmental justice. So as state legislators, we listen to people in the movement, and we listen to 3 incredible Indigenous women who I serve with in the Minnesota House of Representatives, and I want to give them a shout out. Representative Heather Keeler from Moorhead, Senator Mary Kunesh from the northern suburbs of the Twin Cities, along with Representative Jamie Becker-Finn, also from northern Twin Cities suburbs. We listen to them and we galvanize support in the legislature for water protectors, writing letters, testifying, speaking alongside in allyship. And this was very, very important. We started just with a few people when this struggle started in the mid-2010s, 5, 6, 7 years ago. And now 40 legislators have recently been engaged and signed important letters to President Biden, to our state agencies. And there's so much more to say, Ashley, but I'll just conclude in the interest of time by saying, you know, Ron's work was so critical because our state agencies didn't report these frack outs and this pollution that was taking place. And so working in alliance with Ron and others, we wrote a letter, again, over 30 state legislators to our pollution control agency saying, you need to come forward. You need to talk about these violations and the consequences to these crimes that will happen. And so really working in partnership, we were able to accomplish that. And so, you know, moving forward, I think this is a very important step that we've taken as elected officials and allies of this very critical movement for justice in our state. So thank you, and I want again, I'll be available, and hopefully if you all have questions, we want to get to yours right now, so we're cutting things a little short.
Thank you, Frank. So these are some links for you to follow if you want to learn more. Here's my fiery indictment speech, okay? So this pipeline right now, the oil is flowing. It's the dirtiest oil on earth from the tar sands. This pipeline isn't needed. There's no economic necessity for it. It has the impact of 50 coal-fired power plants. And Minnesota has a Democratic governor, you know, and we have a Democrat in the White House who is saying he wants to take action on the climate. And this is the lowest hanging fruit. Stopping this pipeline has a tremendous impact, and it's possible, right? So we saw Biden stop Keystone XL. Like, we've seen these other pipelines, you know, shut down after, seen DAPL shut down after the oil is flowing, after construction's done, and we have that potential right now. Just because it's already on doesn't mean we can't shut it off, right? So if we can't do the easy things, if we can't shut off this pipeline, we didn't even really get to mention the impact on our communities, but this actually put all of the Native people in northern Minnesota at tremendous risk. People in our community are at a huge risk for sex trafficking, for sexual violence. 4 pipeline contractors were arrested for sex trafficking during the construction of the pipeline, and we had warned legislators and regulators for years that would be an impact. And they allowed this construction to happen anyway because of the power of the building trades unions in our state. And many other unions that should have been standing against the pipeline because of our shared values didn't take a stand because they were afraid of the power of some of those large unions. So as long as Democrats are being held back by building trades unions, whose members for the most part don't even vote for Democrats, they can't claim to be good climate actors. So shutting down this pipeline is the most critical thing I think that Joe Biden could do today. He could take that action and stop this pipeline today and make sure that our wild rice beds, our ancestors survived genocide. And these traditions that we have access to, these foods we have access to, those are our sacred things that our ancestors put their lives on the line to protect. And we lost so many of them in those fights. And so we have these things remaining, and all of that's being sacrificed in the name of a foreign oil corporation, in the name of Enbridge, right? So as much as we talk here in this building about holding all of our governments accountable, I think it's even more important that we talk about how we're holding these corporations. We heard this horrifying statistic yesterday, right? There are 500 fossil fuel representatives here, right? I said at the beginning I was gonna say, if you work for a fossil fuel company and you're in this room, you have to leave. So I hope there's none of you here. But that's a horrifying thing. The fossil fuel industry is more represented the largest country delegation here. And there's twice as many fossil fuel representatives here as there are Indigenous people in the official UN Indigenous Coalition. And that's Indigenous people from all around the world, right? So anyway, that's my fiery rant at the end. Thank you all so much for coming. And really, I ask you to go to stopline3.org and continue to take action with us. This fight is not over. We are tremendously hurt and in a grieving period because that oil is putting our water and our rice and our people in danger. But we are not giving up this fight. So thank you for joining us today.